Welcome to EPH 456, where we seek to understand the truth. In John 17:17, Jesus said, "Thy word is truth." This week we continue our verse-by-verse study on the book of Job with part 8. Hope you enjoy. It is time. Dear Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this day. Thank you for another opportunity to bring us together. We ask, Lord, that you open up our hearts and minds that we would receive what you have for us with an open mind and with objectivity. We ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so my apologies. Voice sounds probably a little weird, but that's all right because you guys will get the gist of what I'm saying. So if I take a few more drinks than normal, that's just because we're getting over this, whatever this thing I had. Bree says I was sick. I don't get sick. I don't claim that. So, but nevertheless, apparently there's a little cold going around. So with that, there's my disclaimers for the night. So we are still in the book of Job. This is part 8. We've been in Job for a couple months. We are over halfway through the book. This is our verse-by-verse study of it, which as it's been working out, we're able to go through about 2 to 3 chapters a session, depending on how long they are. And based on that, we got a few weeks left to Job. But things will ramp up here pretty soon as far as the commentary, as we're wrapping up some arguments tonight between Job and his friends. So that should be fairly interesting. So just a small recap. The recaps are getting smaller and smaller as we get more and more to recap, as we get deeper and deeper into the book. But just a small recap. We are in the book of Job. Some of the aspects of Job is potentially the oldest book in the Bible, the author of which is unknown. We've spoken about some very fascinating mysteries within the book of Job, and I'm actually planning the next series, which will discuss some of these mysteries. It's going to be pretty interesting. I think as Christians, we do not put enough, or we do not look to understand how do I say this? As Christians, we downplay the supernatural of our faith. And I want to change that within the group. I think we'd be remiss to not understand and embrace how supernatural our faith really is. I mean, the cornerstone of our faith is literally God incarnated in a virgin woman, born into this world, supernaturally healed people, casted out demons, taught philosophies that no man could ever even understand, raised people from the dead himself, cast out demons, died, and then rose again. And then if that wasn't enough, floated on up into heaven. If that isn't supernatural, I don't know what is. So I think as part of the church, and when I mean the church, I mean like the church of God, the church, it's almost like we don't embrace that supernatural enough or seek to understand it. And so the next series is going to be a lot about that. So it should be interesting nonetheless. But anyway, we talked about the part of the mysteries within the book. We talked about the supernatural attacks. We talked about, what the repercussions of those were, unfortunate repercussions those were. And then we have Job's friends jump on the scene. And after 7 days of silence, the debates begin. So also in previous lessons, we talked about the perspective of each friend and what they represented and what position they would be arguing from or debating from, if you will. And we've made it through the first round of debates. And tonight, with Zophar's second round, we will conclude the second round, well, and Job's rebuttals. I guess I should also include that. We will conclude the second round of debates. Now, there's only 3. And what's interesting is that all of them will not go to round 3. One of them drops off, and then you got an interesting character that comes in there, and then you have a really interesting character that comes in at the end. So round 3 is going to go a little different than rounds 1 and 2. And like I said before, we'll introduce some new people into the theater, if you will, as you will see next week. So what my hope is, as we're 8 lessons in Job, is that there's a few things that I'm hoping that we can do at this point as a group. Number 1 is that understanding that basic communication is a key fundamental in life, our life. And through these examples of Job interacting with his friends, us being reminded of how important those fundamental aspects of communications are. And after going through a verse by verse, explaining Job's friends' arguments, Job's counterpoints, we should really be able to see how not to do it, right? These are perfect examples of how not to communicate with each other. Sure, absolutely. You guys are welcome. It's good. I mean, at the end of the day, if we're not learning, then what good is this? That's just the reality of it. And thank you for sharing. I appreciate that. So I'm hoping for that for all of us, is to be able to understand these key points of being able to communicate. Attacking each other is just not how we solve problems within the body of Christ, within anywhere. But understand that criticism is necessary for growth. It is. So is evaluating and testing. But it's how we do it. We must be merciful and with love when we critique our fellow man. We must also be emotionally mature when we are being criticized and understand the bigger picture of it's probably for our own benefit that this is happening. So as a side note, this practice is totally counter to the world. In the world, not of the world. Notice that the world sees when it sees that you don't agree with them, what happens? Cancel culture happens. Their responses are extremely disrespectful. Oh, you hate me. Oh, you're not listening to me. You don't agree with me, so I want to end you because you don't see everything eye to eye with me. Like a child throwing a temper tantrum. And this is exactly what we are not supposed to do. Right? The second thing of that, I'll just leave that one alone. I could go on 20 minutes on that, so let me leave that one alone. The second thing I want you guys to be able to do at this point is just recognize the spiritual aspects and keep in mind the ultimate goal of the enemy. See, again, it's my opinion. We as the church do not focus on understanding spiritual aspects enough. And spirituality is something that we should be embracing and trying to grow spiritually through studying the word and prayer. And in which not forsaking our duties to defend the faith, regardless of who our foe is, right? I've had some discussions this week about defending the faith. Be proud of what you believe in. So last week, we discussed Bildad's second argument, and under that lens, or under the lens, I guess I should say, of the enemy, and how Satan would see this as a strategic plan that would be taking form through to fruition. And as I explained it last week, oftentimes we don't necessarily pay attention to the end game or how the enemy progresses through his strategy of manipulation and deceit. Understanding that it does and includes using others to do his will. We normally don't recognize this until it's too late. So, before we begin with Zophar's second argument, I want to remind you guys of those things, because we have to understand that we are in a spiritual war. We need to be constantly conscious of that. Our actions and what we do in this life either strengthens or weakens the enemy's position within our life and in the lives of others. So, with that in mind, we need to be aware and we need to treat others accordingly. So, as we've done the last few weeks, I'm going to give you the very briefest summary of Zophar's second argument, which we're going to go through in detail verse by verse. So with our buddy Zophar, if you can remember the first time he was up, he's our mathematician of the group. He's the guy that comes with the intellectual points of view. Very, very logical. And he's firing again from an intellectual, almost mathematical precision. Similar to his first argument, just with a lot more spice this time around. As these debates are amping up, they're getting more and more heated. And that's not really too hard to understand. It's just like a regular conversation. If I'm in a conversation with you and you say something I don't like, and I decide I'm going to act emotionally immature about it, and I start to put my defense up, then what happens? Then I say something to you that I know is going to get you underneath your skin. And then you're going to let that get under your skin, and then the insults are going to start to get worse. Things are going to progress, right? Well, that's just exactly what's happening here. It starts out small, like, hey, Job, kind of what's going on? If you kind of seem like, that you might be, is there some sin in your life that you might want to take a look at? Job's kind of like, no, I don't know what's going on. And then as it's been ramping up through this period, the conversation has gotten more and more intense. And it's no different this week. So Zophar acknowledges that the wicked may prosper temporarily. And this is going to be a key point as we go through. But will face the swift, inevitable divine destruction. He also continues to argue that the joy of the godless, is fleeting. And their suffering is an absolute direct result of hidden sin. Okay? So this view of Zophar's is very powerful because it completely coincides with Job's life to this point. Job starts off rich, which basically endorses Zophar's point on the wicked prospering temporarily, because Job prospered temporarily. And then followed by Job's swift downfall, which endorses his point about how God has finally got around to giving Job, as a wicked man, his just due. So Zophar feels completely confident in his position. Excuse me. So a couple of other points. He looks at it from the perspective of there's an inevitable fall. The wicked will prosper for a time, but eventually that time is short-lived. There will be vivid judgment. And in chapter 20, when we go through Zophar's argument, you're going to find he describes a terrifying, unavoidable fate for the wicked. He also introduces an interesting metaphor where he compares the wicked to eating something that is sweet, that's soured in their stomach. And then he gets kind of graphic with his description there, so that'll be fun. If you got a weak stomach, then close your ears. And then he continues to lobby his accusations of injustice and brings another interesting thing to this that we'll go into, because I believe this is significant. He starts accusing Job of acquiring his wealth unjustly. And this is payback. So up until this point, you've heard him attack his kids. You've heard wifey show up and, talk her stuff. But we haven't heard of anybody talk about Job being a questionable businessman until now. So again, it's not, to me, that's significant. So we'll get into that. And then lastly, a few more little observations. Zophar is going to continue with this dogmatic theology and formulaic view of God. I think I've told you guys all that already. You can see the emotional escalation again. Like I said before, we're all guilty of this one. We've all got into a fight with somebody as far as argument goes. We all know how this thing escalates. And as soon as we take something personal, then there's the lashing out part because we want to get them back. There's that automatic, natural get back that I want to get, right? And so we act. And sometimes that's very, very viciously, as my man Zophar does here. We're also going to touch on the misapplication of truth. Zophar holds the general truth of God punishing the wicked, but does not consider that he tests the righteous, which we know that he does. And then lastly, he engages in a little cognitive dissonance as he doubles down on his position, not listening to Job at all, which is evidence of his confirmation bias, which we also know a lot about. So again, I think as we go through Job, I've said this before, I'll say it again, I'm going to keep saying it. I think, one of the bigger overarching lessons of Job is teaching us how to communicate with each other, with showing us the inverse, the opposite of how to do it. So with that, Job chapter 20, verse 1. Then Zophar the Naamathite answered and said, "Therefore my anxious thoughts make me answer." Interesting. "Because of the turmoil within me. And I have heard the rebuke that reproaches me, and the spirit of my understanding causes me to answer." See, this is exactly what I'm talking about right here. This is the KJV poetic way of saying, I'm going to stop talking only so I can talk again. You said something that I'm not happy about. My wheels are turning and I'm really trying to figure out how to get back at you. That's what that means. And I'm compelled to do so because you said something that I'm not okay with. So again, I want you to take these verses and just compare them to your last argument, because this is exactly how it goes. And I just find it interesting that this guy, however many thousands of years he existed, just described to you the exact emotions that I feel before I snap in an argument. Exact same thing. This is the KJV version. He just told you. Right? My anxious thoughts makes me answer because of the turmoil within me. I mean, that's some old English version of saying that you made me mad and now I'm about to come after you. I don't know how else to say it. I've heard the rebuke that reproaches me. I've heard the rebuke that reproaches me. Meaning that I heard what you said about me that was disagreeing to me and I'm offended. That's what he means. That's what he's saying. And again, it's you said something I didn't like. Now I got to get all passive aggressive on you. And he's about to do this. And again, we're no different because we do it too. Verse 4. Here's your passive aggressive. It's almost like you just know it's coming. Do you not know this of old, since man was placed on earth, that the triumphing of the wicked is short, and the joy of the hypocrite is but for a moment? Though his haughtiness mounts up to the heavens, and his head reaches to the clouds, yet he will perish forever like his own refuse. And that's actually a mistranslation. It's actually, yet he will perish forever like his own dung. Yeah, that's kind of crazy. Those who have seen him will say, where is he? Okay, so I'm going to stop right there. So to break this down, verses 4 and 5, it's exactly as I said it was going to happen. It's almost like our human conversations, the patterns of them, have not changed throughout all the generations. I mean, I find that absolutely fascinating. Here's a guy, however many thousands of years ago, and their engagement in conversation is the exact same way we do today. Like we haven't learned anything as a society at all. I mean, verse 4 and 5 starts out with a sarcastic rhetorical questions, right? Do you not know this? Well, obviously he does. So why would you say it like that if you're not trying to get in his skin? As if to say, I thought you were wise, talking about all that stuff over there, but you don't know this? Like, what do you mean? And what's interesting is that amongst some theologians, this is considered a direct mock to Job saying in Job 19:25 when he says, I know my Redeemer lives. So what Zophar is saying here is, oh, so if you know your Redeemer lives, then you know he punishes the wicked. Do you not know this? How could you not know this? Almost, if he lives, then you should know this. What are you thinking about? And again, verse 7 is kind of like a nice shot. That's a nice insult when he goes, yet he will perish forever like his own dung. Great. So basically, what are you really calling him? I will leave that to you. Verse 8. He will fly away like a dream and not be found. Yes, he will be chased away like a vision of the night. The eye that saw him will see him no more, nor will his place behold him any more. His children will seek for the favor of the poor, and his hands will restore his wealth. His bones are full of his youthful vigor, but it will lie down with him in dust. So verse 8 through 11 is essentially Zophar's attempt at providing metaphors, right? Using things like, well, let me take a step back. These are metaphors that he would say that would describe the ultimate fate of the wicked. So his eye will see no more, meaning that, he's going to be dead. He's lost his place in society or his status. When it talks about that in verse 10, his children will seek the favor of the poor, and his hands will restore his wealth. His bones is full of youthful vigor, but he will lie down with them in dust. So it's like you've lost your place, you've lost your status, your heritage, if you will. And he hits back on this one again. And the bones of your youthful vigor only to become dust means that you're going to be cut down in your prime. That's what he means by that. Or before your time, if you will. So that's what he's trying to explain. Verse 12. Though evil is sweet in his mouth, and he hides it under his tongue, though he spares it and does not forsake it, but still keep it in his mouth, yet his food in his stomach turns sour. So we alluded to that earlier. And it becomes cobra venom within him. He swallows down riches and vomits them up again. God casts them out of his belly. He will suck the poison of cobras. Nice. The viper's tongue will slay him. He will not see the streams, the river flowing with honey and cream. He will restore that which he has labored and will not swallow it down from the proceeds of business. He will get no enjoyment. For he has oppressed and forsaken the poor. He has violently seized a house which he did not build. So there you go. This is the exact thing I was talking about earlier, about Zophar challenging Job's acquisition of riches as ill-gotten gains. Okay? When you're saying stuff like, he will restore that which he labored and will not swallow it down. He will get no enjoyment. For he has oppressed and forsaken the poor. He has violently seized a house which he did not build. Meaning that you took something that you did not earn legitimately. Okay? So, up until this point, again, folks have been taking random shots at the kids and the wife. She obviously made her comments. But now, situation is escalated again. Because, again, this is an attack directly on Job's business practices, which is a direct attack on his credibility and his integrity. See, a man or woman's reputation is not just in one area. There's a part of it where people look at it as a combination of all areas that they know about us, which is why it's important that we represent ourselves well as we represent Christ in all these areas, right? So as an example, if I was, I will say it like this. So I did a wedding last week or a couple weeks ago, whenever it was. And one of my rules within a wedding is, every once in a while, I'll smoke a cigar. You guys know that. But I won't do it at weddings because whilst I feel convicted in my spirit that it's fine, whatever, it's just like drinking a glass of wine or whatever, I just refer you to 2 Colossians 15 through 17 to get right with that. However, some people won't look at it like that. And so I don't want to damage my witness because there's a bigger thing in play here. See, we can't say things like, I don't care what they think about me, because we should care. We should care that we're representing God to the best of our ability. That's why we should care. Okay? Not necessarily caring for someone's approval about what we're doing, but we should care about our reputation, right? And this is a direct attack on Job's reputation, and not just his immediate downfall. It's one thing to say that you've committed some wrong. And up until this point, all three friends have said this. You've committed some wrong, you've sinned, and now you're being punished. But see, Zophar is taking it to the next level. By him attacking his business practices, what he's saying to Job is your whole life has been one gigantic sin practice. Because your wealth, everything you've done is all, compares it to, for he has oppressed and forsaken the poor. He has violently seized a house which he did not build. So that means that essentially verses 12 through 19 can be summarized like this. Basically, Zophar is saying all of Job's life, all of his accomplishments are a lie. So it's not that you did something wrong, you saying you're being punished. It's more like your entire life is sin. And now, as a result of this life, you're getting your comeuppance, if you will, and you're having to vomit out all of your riches or all of these ill-gotten gains that you've gotten. So this kind of like brings it all full circle and gets an attack on Job's complete character. Because up until this point, we've left the business practices out of it. Now, anything's fair game. Hope you guys are getting that. Verse 20. Because he knows no quietness in his heart, he will not save anything he desires. Nothing is left for him to eat. Let me stop right there. So, what he's saying there is that the wicked, they know no quietness. They don't know any rest. And in this, Zophar is pointing right at Job, saying that, you see this right here? You know the wickedness isn't getting any rest. You're getting what you deserve. And his statement about that the well-being or prosperity of the wicked will not last, again, fits Job's circumstances. Job was rich. At the present moment, he's not rich. Zophar says, well, makes perfect sense to me. Because that's the track of the wicked. Yeah, you prosper for a minute, and then after that, you get slapped. That's what's happened to Job. Therefore, you're wicked. Just, again, the rigid, logical mind, in his mind, this is irreversibly true. There really isn't anything that Job can do about it at this point. And he's going to sum it up for you here as we conclude the chapter. Verse 22. In his self-sufficiency, he will be in distress. Every hand of misery will come against him. When he is about to fill his stomach, God will cast on him the fury of his wrath and will rain it on him while he is eating, meaning when you least expect it. He will flee from the iron weapon. A bronze bow will pierce him through. It is drawn and comes out of the body. Yes, the glittering point comes out of his gall. Terrors come upon him. Total darkness is reserved for his treasures. And unfanned fire will consume him. It shall go ill with him who is left in his tent. The heavens will reveal his iniquity, and the earth will rise up against him. The increase of his house will depart, and his goods will flow away in the day of his wrath. This is the portion from God for the wicked man. Basically, he's saying, I said all of this to say, this is the portion of God for the wicked man. The heritage appointed to him by God. Okay, so let me backtrack a little bit. So, verse 27, I want to call this one out because this is a rebuttal to one of Job's earlier points in Job 16, 18, and 19. So let me just kind of bring this full perspective for you. So Job 16, 18, and 19, when Job talks about calling in heaven and earth as a witness. O earth, do not cover my blood, and let my cry have no resting place. Surely even now my witness is in heaven, and my evidence is on high. All right. So Job says that in 16 as a response to Eliphaz's original argument or second argument. So in verse 27, Zophar kind of takes a shot at him a little bit. And he says, the heavens will reveal his iniquity, and the earth will rise up against him. So Job is saying, the heavens are my witness that I'm innocent. And Zophar is saying, oh no, bro, the heavens and the earth are going to rise up against you because you are guilty. That's the subtlety that's going on here with that particular verse. And to be fair, to kind of bring it full circle for me personally, I can see my previous arguments going this way, where I would look at, or I remember, I should say, when the person I'm arguing with made some comments. And then I turn around and I reverse those comments and throw it back in their face. Now, all of that seems pretty obvious now that we're going through Job, but it wasn't obvious when I was doing it. Interesting how that goes. In verse 29, real quick, I want to touch on this one because this is Zophar's logical conclusion. This is how he takes his argument, wraps it in a bow, ties it up. This is the portion from God for a wicked man. Meaning that this is what you get, bro. The heritage appointed to him by God. So essentially, if I'm Job, I'm taking this like this. Zophar just said, if your kids get killed, all your wealth is taken, your wife turns her back on you, you get smitten with some kind of crazy, unexplainable disease, this is God's vengeance against you. That's his point. It is what it is. Here's Job's response, chapter 21, verse 1. Then Job answered and said, listen carefully to my speech, and let this be your consolation. Bear with me that I may speak, and after I have spoken, keep mocking. As for me, is my complaint against man? And if it were, why should I not be impatient? Look at me and be astonished. Put your hand over your mouth. Even when I remembered, I'm terrified and trembling. Takes hold of my flesh. All right, so let me stop there. So verse 3, I think it's funny. He's like, listen, man, all I'm asking you to do is listen to me. After you listen to me, you guys can keep on mocking me, do whatever you want to do. I think at this point, Job's kind of come to the conclusion that defending himself with this crazy group that he calls his friends is, quite frankly, a worthless cause, okay? But he's going to press on and try to get his point across. And I got to give him some credit. He does in the end of this chapter. It's very, very, very wise how the angle that he took to get there. We'll touch on that as we get through, when we get to it. Verse 4, I find interesting because he reminds his friends of his complaint with a rhetorical shot of a question. Is my complaint with God? You guys should know that. We went through this twice now. And then in verse 5 and 6, he basically explains to Zophar, listen, man, I know what condition I'm in. I understand. Look at me. I put my hand in my own mouth. Like, oh my goodness, look at myself, right? So he's like, hey, man, I haven't forgotten what I look like. I understand it. I know I'm going through it right now, but I'm still innocent. Verse 7. Why do the wicked live and become old? Yes, become mighty in power. Their descendants are established with them. But you guys have to pay attention to this argument right here. Why do the wicked live and become old? Yes, become mighty in power. This is Job asking Zophar this question. Their descendants are established with them in their sight, and their offspring before their eyes. Their houses are safe from fear. Neither is the rod of God upon them. Their bull breeds without failure. Their cows calve without miscarriage, and send forth their little ones like a flock. And their children dance. They sing to the tambourine and the harp, and rejoice to the sound of the flute. They spend their days in wealth, and in a moment go down to the grave. Yet they say to God, depart from us. For we do not desire the knowledge of your ways. Who is the Almighty that we should serve him? And what profit do we have if we pray to him? Indeed, our prosperity is not in their hand. The counsel of the wicked is far from me. How is the lamp of the wicked put out? How often does their destruction come upon them? The sorrows God distributes in his anger, they are like straw before the wind, like the chaff that a storm carries away. They say God lays up one's iniquity for his children. Let him recompense him, that he may know it. Let his eyes see his destruction, and let him drink of the wrath of the Almighty. For what does he care about his household after him when the number of his months is cut in half? All right, so I said a lot there. Verse 7 is key to the rebuttal. And this was very, very wise by Job. Because what Job basically is saying here to Zophar is he's saying, if the wicked get punished by God all the time and they're quote unquote, I'm sorry, how did he put that? I want to make sure I get this right. When he says, their bones are full of youthful vigor, but he will lie him down in dust. Well, Job says, why do the wicked live and become old then? If the wicked are cut down in their prime all the time, and that's kind of what you're saying, why do the wicked become old? Why do they become mighty in power? And this would have been a huge point, almost like a mic drop moment in this conversation, because Zophar and any of his friends, if they would have listened objectively to that point, that would have caused them to think. Because I guarantee you, all three of them had knew someone who was wicked, who was prosperous, who knew someone who was wicked, who had a good life. So Job's point to Zophar is, listen, although I can't prove to you that I'm innocent because you're not listening, what I can prove to you is the wicked prosper. So whilst you won't listen to me, I'll say it again. While you aren't listening to me, my claim is the innocent suffer. You're saying, oh, no. The innocent doesn't suffer. You're suffering because you're wicked. Well, Job basically just says, well, if I can't prove that point, I'll prove the opposite, which is the wicked prosper. And to a logical mind like Zophar's, he would have automatically drawn the conclusion that the opposite would have been true. And this slaps his entire argument. So what's interesting is Job really brings this home when he says their descendants are established with them in their sight, meaning that they have a heritage. I am the patriarch of the family. I have something to give to my son. My son will have something to give to his son, and so on and so forth. I have a heritage, right? He even goes forth to every aspect of his life that they just attacked, and they said, okay, you're wicked because God destroyed your cattle. You're wicked because God destroyed your house. You're wicked because your wife is left you or whatever it is she's doing. You're wicked because you're smitten with bulls. And Job is saying, hey, you have known wicked men. And they have descendants that live in their sight. Their kids aren't dead. They still got a heritage. And then he goes on. And it's almost like he was kind of getting his footing there when he talks about the cattle. You said that wicked people, God destroys their cattle, right? Because he destroyed mine, right? Well, verse 10, their bulls breed without failure. Their cows calve without a miscarriage. They send forth their little ones like a flock. So he's like, listen, man, this cattle of the wicked, they reproduce without any issues. Meaning that wealth of the wicked is still obtained organically, despite their wicked ways. So he's like, okay, well, if you see the righteous are like that and the wicked is like that, well, how can you say that only the wicked suffer? He's like, their children dance, verse 11. They spend their time in wealth, verse 13. Prosperity is in their hand. And all this to say, God depart from us. This is what the wicked is saying. We don't want to know your ways. We good. And again, this is a huge point Job is making, and it totally destroys all of their arguments, with especially Zophar's, with this logical position, which is probably one of the reasons why we don't hear from him again. Interesting enough, I mean, I don't know why he didn't make this point earlier. Maybe he just thought about it or whatever the case may be. I'm not sure, but like if he could have led with this, we probably would have had a shorter book. Anyway, can anyone teach God knowledge? Like what? Beautiful passage. All right, verse 22. Can anyone teach God knowledge? Since he judges those on high, one dies in his full strength, being wholly at ease and secure. His pails are full of milk, and the marrow of his bones is moist. Another man dies in the bitterness of his soul, never having eaten with pleasure. They lie down alike in the dust, and worms cover them. This is exactly what I was saying earlier. Job, first of all, the first part is sweet. Can anyone teach God knowledge? Since he judges those on high. I love that. But past that, he's drawing a parity between what they would consider righteous judgment or the wicked judged and what happens to the righteous. And what Job is saying in verse 23 to 26 is they're the same. Their outcomes are potentially the same. And only God, who is on high, is the one who judges that. That's his point. When he says, one dies in full strength, being wholly eased and secure. Pails of milk are full, marrow of his bones are moist. Another man dies in the bitterness of his soul, never having eaten with pleasure. They both lie down alike in the dust, and worm covers them. That's his conclusion. And I find it interesting because, I mean, at least from my perspective, it's like we get into, why God does different things and all that. And the reality is that the rain falls on the just and the unjust. There's good things that happen to bad people, and there's bad things that happen to good people. But who are we to say? And I think that's what Job is saying here. Let me finish up the chapter. 27, verse 27. Look, I know your thoughts and the schemes with which you would wrong me. For you say, where is the house of the prince? And where is the tent, the dwelling place of the wicked? Have you not asked those who traveled the road? And do you not know their signs? For the wicked are reserved for the day of doom. They shall be brought out on the day of wrath. Who condemns his way to his face? And who repays him for what he has done? Yet he shall be brought to the grave, and a vigil kept over the tomb. The clouds of the valley shall be sweet to him. Everyone shall follow him, as countless have gone before him. How then can you comfort me with empty words, since falsehood remains in your answers? So basically what Job is saying in verse 27, jig is up, baby. I know your schemes. I know what you're doing. I can see you guys trying to get me to do something. I might not know what it is, but I know what's going on. I know what's going on. And for Zophar, that's checkmate. Argument over, buddy. And again, I speculate. No one knows for sure, but Zophar exits our story. He does not engage a third time. So hopefully what I'm thinking is, from an intellectual point of view, is that Job's points kind of quieted him and he had no response. So, but an interesting point that I want to mention, and I'll expand on next week as we close, whether knowing or not knowing, Job utilized one key aspect that his friends didn't realize. One key aspect that his friends didn't realize. Time. See, what you'll notice is that time, or the passing of time, removes a lot of false narratives, a lot of false feelings, and a lot of bad actors. Time. Simply because eventually everybody slips up and their schemes come to an end because they can't keep them up. And their true intentions are revealed. See, part of the issue why we get tripped up, and when I mean we, I do mean we, because myself is all in there, is we're so impatient. We don't let situations develop. We just act. We get all in our feelings and we just go, boom, we just explode on it. We don't think. And I find it interesting because patience is one of the fruits of the Spirit. And so is self-control. So I would challenge you to look at patience from a different perspective, because we normally think that patience means that we don't argue as much, or we don't get upset as quick, and we can control our emotions a little bit, and that's that, right? And patience is that. But it's also strategic in nature. See, patience allows for us to wait for our enemy to make a mistake. See, if you're patient, if I'm patient, it's harder for us to make bad mistakes because we've demonstrated self-control. And because things are moving slower, we're able to make more precise judgments. See, demonstrating that self-control and patience, which is the ability to wait until your true path be revealed. So the next time you guys get into a situation, the next time you are facing an obstacle and it comes your way, just stop. Take a deep breath. Think. Pray. And then be patient. Any questions? Thank you for watching. And may the Lord watch between me and thee while we're absent one from another.